My brother Sean Ryan was wrongfully convicted in 1984. While serving time at Auburn Correctional Facility, he was charged with an arson murder of another inmate, Paul Carbonaro, and the late Peter Corning, each of whom have a very long history of wrongful convictions and misconduct. Their misconduct had several overturned convictions. A few years later, now Peter Corning was sitting on the bench as a Supreme Court judge, and Paul Carbonaro was the new DA. There are many more individuals who are still in prison today, including my brother, who were maliciously prosecuted by these individuals. The aforementioned officials coerced, threatened, and bribed jailhouse informants to commit perjury against my brother. There is substantial evidence to support these claims. My brother, Sean Ryan, and his case and his wrongful conviction is the catalyst to pros and cons. Hello, and welcome to Pros and Cons. I'm your host, Heather Trentacosta. Today's guests are Casilda Roper-Simpson, who is campaigning for civil court judge in Brooklyn. Welcome, Casilda.
Thank you. Thank you.
And we have our returning guest, Terrence Coffee, who is an adjunct professor at NYU, and he's also a criminal justice advocate. So thank you both for joining me today. I would love to jump right in and just ask about your current campaign, which I'm very excited about, as a civil court judge. So if you want to just fill us in on where you are in the process of campaigning right now, and what your goals are, and what you want to say and speak to your constituents.
Well, thank you so very much for having me this evening. It's certainly, I'm humbled and I'm honored to be one of your guests. I am presently running for civil court judge, and what a civil court judge, the task of that particular position is, if you're elected, you can either be assigned to criminal court or family court or civil court. And right now, my campaign, we're getting towards the finish line. We're getting close to it. The early voting starts June 12th. The election is actually June 22nd. And with 5 weeks, 30-something days, but who's counting? I have been an attorney for over 25 years. Prior to that, I've been in the justice system as a legal secretary, a paralegal, an attorney, and now I am presently an administrative law judge. And I've been handling the cases that I handle. I do social service cases. And I'm also an adjunct professor. I teach criminal justice and paralegal at Malloy College. And I've been teaching there for about 13 years or so. I also used to teach at New York City Community College. And I was humbled to teach there because I actually went there as a student. I received my 2-year degree. And I have a lot of experience. I've done trials, bench trials, jury trials, both criminal and civil, in every county in New York City.
Wow.
I've been a criminal defense attorney since 1996. I used to be an 18B attorney, where if you cannot afford an attorney, the state assigned me, a person like myself, an 18B attorney on the assigned counsel panel to represent you. And I handle cases as simple as jumping a turnstile to assault cases. And in my own private practice, I also did homicide, murder cases, robbery cases. So I've been pretty busy. I'm also a community person. I've done a lot of community work. And I don't want to take up too much of the time to say my entire resume. In terms of looking for and seeing other things about me, my website for my judicial campaign is Roper-Simpson, the number 4, for judge.com. But right now, we're looking for volunteers. We're looking for people to help. So this is for the entire Brooklyn. So anyone in Brooklyn can vote for me. So anyone that wants to volunteer, I've had a great engagement with the community, and people have, even yesterday in my community, I live in Canarsie, I was handing out things and someone says, hey, let's help you. And, over here by where I live, one of the Nigel projects, someone said, let me help you put those things in the doors. And I so appreciate that. So
that's wonderful.
Really great.
Yeah. Oh, wow. So you have quite an extensive resume. Pretty impressive, I'd say. If you're not fit for this position, then shoot, I don't know who would be. You've got quite an extensive background. Thank you for sharing that. I'm curious now, with with all that you have under your belt and the current position you hold today, what would be the major difference in this shift to a new position as civil court judge?
It would be the type of cases.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, as an administrative law judge, I'm doing the type of work that a judge would do in terms of being impartial, my temperament, handling people and taking the facts that's presented to me and mentioning and applying the law and regulations.
Mm-hmm.
But it would be the different type of cases. Civil court would handle. In civil court, you have cases up to $25,000. Small claims cause $10,000, and it would be the type of cases: landlord-tenant, breach of contract, a slip and fall. I handle slip and fall cases. I had automobile cases. I used to work for middle to large law firms. I used to work for Brooklyn Young Gas as one of the clients that one of my firms had. So that would be the case in civil court. And criminal court, of course, would be the type of cases I did as a defense attorney. And I also handled one of the worst police brutality cases in the history of New York City, which is Abner Louima.
Yes.
And fortunately, I handle other police brutality cases. And in handling those cases, it wouldn't come to civil court because a case like Mr. Louima the numbers were exceeded 25,000. So the Supreme Court. And with Mr. Louima's case, it went to actually the federal court. As most people know, that case settled for quite a few $1 million.
Right. And there were also criminal charges on Officer Volpe. Is that correct?
That's right. Excellent. The criminal charges of Mr. Louima were dropped on Mr. Louima. Myself and the other attorneys, the first set of attorneys, we were able to get those charges dropped. There have been some distinction where Mr. Louima stated, no, we were not the ones that did that. I beg to differ, we were. At the time that those charges were dropped, myself and the other two attorneys were the only attorneys on the case.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah, I distinctly remember that case and how shocking that was. And I say shocking, and that was so many years ago, yet here we are today witnessing very similar instances on the news and social media. So, I thank you for the part that you played in getting some type of justice, although justice will never really be served for Mr. Louima and what was done to him and how he suffered and his family suffered. But, individuals like yourself who were on the side of justice and doing right by us, I thank you. Thank you so much.
So one of the things I learned from that case and what it opened my eyes to was how the community came around and championed around Mr. Louima. We didn't have Black Lives Matters then, but it was some perspective of that. And when I saw what was happening with the George Floyd case, it reminded me, because with Mr. Louima, we had a march and a march all the way from Grand Army Plaza all the way to the bridge. Right. And it was a very diverse group of individuals that came and marched and said, this is not okay. And I saw that and relived that when I saw the Black Lives Matters and everything from Mr. Floyd and all the others individuals that we have lost for the police brutality and the excessive use of force that have been happening, unfortunately, recently.
Right. And if our viewers are not familiar, I would encourage you to just do a Google search of Abner Louima and the Abner Louima case. I think that it speaks to the length and the history of this fight and why Black Lives Matter and the support for Black and Brown people is so important. The injustices faced by minorities, by Black and Brown individuals in this country is nothing new, particularly by law enforcement. And, we really need to be made aware that this is not some new trend that's happening. It is just being shared more readily now because of access to our social media, smartphones. Everybody has a recording device on them now. So, we really need to pay attention to the history and make sure that we do continue on the path for justice. And on that note, I'm going to turn over to Mr. Coffee, and if you would share a little bit about your background and what your thoughts are on where we are and how far we've come with these injustices.
Thank you so much. Once again, I am so delighted to be here. It's great to see you again. Um, it is truly an honor to have an opportunity to share in space with you. You have a great history. You know, I had already began to tell you about your years at Brooklyn Law School and Malloy and all those wonderful things. And I want to thank you so much for your candidacy and the representation of those individuals and communities within our judicial structure. And as far in regards to what Samantha was saying, one of the things that when we talk about, even with the Abner Louima case, we can actually go, back further, because particularly in Black and Brown communities, from a historical lens, it goes back further. We know that the law enforcement agencies have always been a mechanism of society or politicians to inflict upon Black and Brown communities that means of suppression. So we got to go back to the civil rights movements. We have to go back to a Malcolm X era. We have to know that this conversation of police brutality did not just begin in the 80s, the 90s, the 70s. This is a long history that brings us to this space. And I think that one of the things that we're focused on, particularly Ms. Simpson, as you know, the candidacy for the district attorney's office is open. Cy Vance will be leaving office, and that office under his leadership has been criticized in the past. And even though I still support Cy Vance from a historical lens, that office has been, it seems, lacking what we would like to say police accountability. I think that when I think of the case of Abner Louima, I'm really impressed with you and the work that you've done, and I think that what you'll represent in our communities is a voice of equity and equality, which is greatly needed. But I also do want to ask you, what are your views as a candidate on the state of where we're at now, at whatever level for you, with justice reform, and how do you see yourself as an individual first, a mom as first, and I want to say your three beautiful children, but also what does that look like to you moving forward in your own career as a judge, if any of that made sense?
Everything you said makes sense. So there are parameters that I have to work within in answering your question and responding. As a judicial candidate, I have to be extremely careful as to how I respond to anything that may be political or anything that can affect my candidacy. Reform are things that are very much in the news, and as you stated, you're even working on it yourself. So that's the part of our executive branch that doesn't come to the judicial branch. It's legislative things that they are working on. What I will say is that from my academia perspective, as an adjunct professor teaching criminal justice, and as you know, because I probably preaching to the choir, there's three components to our criminal justice system. There's law enforcement, there's the courts, and there's correction. And the part where the court is the judicial perspective of that, which it would be me. And my candidacy requires me to be very prepared, which I am, for our changing legal environment that is occurring and will occur with the reforms that will be imposed or implemented. And because of my experiences, the many years that I've committed to my community and to my professional legal experiences will allow me to commit myself to the problem solving of our ever-changing legal environment. And knowing that I've taught my students over the many years that I've been teaching, 12 or 13 years, that I see the Constitution, and most of them have agreed with me, and our teaching as a chameleon, which changes with our society and the way in our society changes. But I often say to my students, our Constitution changing, I probably would be standing in front of the classroom being their professor. Mm-hmm. So because of that, and because of thinking of reform and what it requires and what the legislators may decide to do, I have to be, or who you're electing to be your judge, you have to make sure that that individual is prepared to be a part of that changing in our legal environment. And I am that person.
Right. Not only prepared, but willing.
Perfect. Yes.
Yes.
I'm committed.
Actually, I did a brief on you, so let me be honest. I always like to know who I'm talking with. You're a great supporter of alternatives to incarceration. I know in particular roles, you have sought to steer cases in those where you saw them beneficial to those individuals who may have come through your course, or in what those capacities you were exercising. Do you feel that's something that you see that justice reform or our current criminal justice system needs diverting from more traditional courts, particularly with low-level offenses, that cases like those should speak to the needs of those individuals who may find themselves in your courts?
Or even further in the community,
yes,
as a whole, right? Yeah.
Yes.
I'm prohibited from saying what I would do when I'm on the bench. Mm-hmm. But what I will say is, I have advocated as a defense attorney, and I have advocated, and the court now has alternatives to incarceration, and the court encourages that. One of the things that the court recently, in the last few years or so, we have a youth court, and that youth court allows individuals to go through that process. And when I practiced on a full-time basis as a defense attorney, we had the drug treatment part. And I love the drug treatment part because one of the two components that you need to be convicted of a crime is the mens reis and the actus reus. And if you don't have the mens reis, which is the mental, mm-hmm. technically cannot be convicted. So if you had some drug addiction and you didn't have the mens reis to actually commit that crime, and they could prove that you had that addiction, the drug treatment part allowed you to get cleaned up. And once you got cleaned up from your drug addiction, they usually got the charges dismissed to put you in a better stead, to allow you to go through getting a job and all those other things. I've had a lot of individuals graduate from that particular part. I've actually had pictures that I've taken with some of the graduates. So the thing is that, yes, but I say again, my experiences, what I've had as a defense attorney and my experience as a plaintiff attorney, I take all that to the bench. That's my professional preparation for a position of this nature. So thank you for doing your research on me. And that's why a lot of our communities don't do the necessary research. And oftentimes we have people on the bench who have absolutely no clue. And I've been saying in my campaigning that I want people to think about the judges as they look to put them on the bench with the big D. And the big D is discretion. Judges have discretion. Yes, we have the law, but we also have discretion. When I hear, even in my cases that I do now, when someone is testifying and providing information, I have to make an evaluation if I think that person is credible. And even though I'm doing remote hearings now, I still have to use my listening skills, because people would stutter, or, we ask the question in 2 and 3 different ways. I can answer the same question in 10 different ways. And if you give me the same answer, I know I'm good. Mm-hmm. So you have to have those skills.
And it also helps to have the connection with your community as well, which thankfully you have because you are a resident there.
I'm a resident there.
Yeah.
But let's keep it real. Because I try to keep it very real. I don't want people to always think that just because a person has the same complexion as you means that they're always going to do right by you. Because I have been in front of a lot of judges that have the same complexion as I, that's not necessarily listening to the defendant that's standing next to me. And my defendant's always pulling on me. Why they not listening? Why they're not looking at me?
Yeah.
So we don't need to just always look at the color. We also need to look at the mindset, similar to what Mr. Coffee did. He did his research. Because what he did was look to see who I am. Because if you really have some value or have done anything, just everybody's Googleable now. And I know that's not a word, but I made it up. Just like
we'll take it.
You're gonna be a judge. You can make up words. Just make up words.
So that's my perspective. I'm not new to this. This is
right.
It's been my passion. My father told us, my siblings, and I'm 4'6". If you do something that you enjoy doing, it will never be a job. This has never been a job for me.
Right. This is your calling.
That's my calling. I raised my 3 babies. And when I went to law school, I had a 4-year-old daughter and a 9-month-old daughter in my first year of law school.
Wow.
And nobody said it was going to be easy, but I know I had to do it, and I did it.
And and just to chime in, I know you have kept deep roots in the Brooklyn community. You teach at Malloy College. You earned your doctorate, your judicial doctorate at Brooklyn Law School, and you continue to represent the Crown Heights community and all these surrounding communities, not only through your role in our judicial course, but also just in the community itself. Do you think that our communities, and not just because I think that the Brooklyn community is just a representation of a broader conversation with our judicial system. Do you think over a period of time that there has been a lack of trust based on the lack of diversity within our judicial courts, that people can, I think that's what I said. Do you feel that there's still this lack of trust based upon a lack of diversity, or that community connection that leaves our communities desolate?
It's not what I feel, it's what people are saying. It's what people are saying to me as I campaign. It's what people are delighted to see me. People says, and it's because we're wearing the mask and I'm standing on the corner saying, "Hi, I'm running for judge. My name is," they'll walk past me, but by the time they hear judge, they say, "Did you say judge?" And they'll come back and take it. And it's you. So I have to stand back, take off my mask and say, "Yeah, it's me."
Right.
I think I'm giving it up for someone else, and they're related. And they're like, no one ever comes to you and say they're running for judge. And I said to you earlier, I met 2 gentlemen that I gave my card to. And I said, "Listen, don't go in the building. We'll put it in the building for you."
Wow.
And that's just, it's because they say, well, nobody ever comes here. Nobody ever tells us anything. But I know the need of the community because they want to be able to trust someone. I have been a criminal defense attorney since 1996. And not because I thought I was going to be rich on it. And I'm blessed that I was able to put my children through school and through college. My eldest has her master's in business and finance. My second has her master's in social work. My son is a working electrician. I've been blessed. So I'm not saying I drive a RAV4. But I'm comfortable because I know that I did what I wanted to do the way I did it.
Right.
And I simply say that it's imperative that we make sure that we bring it back to our community. And I've mentored people. And on this campaign trail, 2 young ladies have asked me to mentor them. And how can I say no? I mentored, before I started my campaign trail, I have 3 young ladies for Brooklyn United that I mentored.
Wow.
Over the years. You know why? Because people have mentored me. I stand on the shoulders of so many. I can only, and may my mother rest in peace, who only had an 8th, 9th grade education, made us promise that we would always help and always give back. And here I stand and speak with you all and say to you, I am who I am, and I am who I will always be. And I will always make sure that I do my very, very best and make not only my parents proud, my siblings proud, my children proud, but my community proud.
Hi, my name is Casilda Roper-Simpson. I want to tell you a little bit about myself. My family and I came from Republic of Panama, and we grew up in Colón. Everybody always say, where you come from in Panama. We came from Colón. And I came with my parents, Norma and Ralph Roper, and we were sent for with my grandparents, Lionel and Anita Scott. And we grew up in Crown Heights. I grew up in Brooklyn. My father bought a house when I was about 10. And I grew up on St. John's in Albany, between Albany and Troy. And I had a great childhood. I can't have any complaints. And the only thing that we heard throughout our entire childhood was 3 things. That's education, education, education. And because I started having challenges in my social study class, my teacher called my mom. And as a result of that, I was summoned to my room to learn that textbook in and out. And while reading that textbook, I discovered the Constitution. And at that point I realized, and it was really emphasized to me in that body, that we all have rights. And I knew then and learned then that I wanted to be a lawyer. I went to New York City Community College. I did legal secretary science. I graduated from there. I went to Baruch College and I did political science. And with my political science degree, I was a paralegal. I still wasn't quite there to becoming a lawyer, but I knew that's what I wanted to do. After leaving Baruch College and working at the DA's office, Kings County, Brooklyn, for about 2.5 years, I had the support of 2 great women and my sister, and I went to Brooklyn Law School. Because at the time when I started my first year of law school, I had my 4.5-year-old baby, Corinne, and I had my 9-month-old daughter, Camille. But the thing about everything that I am is the village that I come from. And my mother and my sister and my aunts and my cousins were my support. And although I was in my first year of law school, I knew I could do it. And I was an older student at the time in law school. I was competing with 21 and 22-year-old, and I was much older. It was tough, but I did it. And it gave me that opportunity to learn more about the Constitution, because one of our main classes in law school is con law. And it's so funny, I remember not being able to go to class one day because my 9-month-old was teething, Camille. And I told my professor, I can't come to class tomorrow, I can't. My mother had to go to the doctor. She says, you would bring that baby and yourself to class. And I did. And after finishing law school, I graduated in 1994. And after graduating in 94, my mother told us to give back. I had to decide what I was going to do. I could either have worked in those big law firms or work with my sister, who had a law office on Fulton Street. Across from the Restoration, I chose to work there. My passion was criminal law. I learned how to do criminal law. I learned from the basic. I was not a prosecutor. I have been a criminal defense attorney since 1996. And I taught myself how to do trials. I taught myself how to go to court. And Mr. Carl Thomas, who is deceased, said to me, if you can't advocate for yourself, you can't advocate for anyone else. Hence, I am the best advocate you can imagine. I have represented Mr. Abner Louima, Patrick Bailey's family, who was killed in East New York. I've represented Miss Webb, a grandmother that was punched in the gut in East New York, by the precinct in her neighborhood in East New York. And I knew then that all of my training and the cases that I have the most passion for are a lot of the young people that come into our court system. I've been an 18B attorney since 1997 in Kings County. And in being an 18B attorney, I've been assigned thousands of cases. And what's most important to me is making sure that the Constitution is upheld by the prosecution. And that's what I learned when my mother put me in my room to learn. And that's what I bring back to myself and my children and my community. My passion for helping my community and wanting to be a lawyer and timidly taking that journey brought me to where I am today, giving back to my community, helping each and every one that I could, whether it was pro bono work, whether it was high profile cases, or whether it was work as a professor at the college where I teach criminal justice. But understanding that the village is imperative and that my spirituality is imperative, and understanding that it's important for me as an attorney to make sure that I continue to give, because but for my community and my ancestors, I will not be who I am today. My name is Casilda Elena Roper-Simpson, and thank you so much for watching.
I would like to invite you at this time to please like and share. If you are enjoying our content, please leave a comment below. If you have a topic or an issue that you would like to discuss on our forum, I invite you to leave us a comment or a message, and we would be more than happy to know what you're interested in. So go ahead and like that and share with your friends and family. I just want to know, what advice would you give the next generation coming up, graduating law school, and getting into serving the people, whether it's in criminal defense or with, as you served as an 18B attorney, what advice would you give as far as how they can give the most of themselves to the future of criminal justice?
Selfless. And I think that is the most powerful thing to do, because when you take on that type of perspective, it so much more come back to you.
Mm-hmm.
And in doing that, even when I do the things that I do, I will often have people say, well, I don't know, what can I give you back? There's nothing anyone can ever give you, because you have to always expect them to pay it forward.
Right.
And if when you give and that person pays it forward, it just makes everything so much better. So they are selfless. And yes, we all have to make money. I'm not talking like crazy. We all have to maintain our bills and things of that nature, but there's so many things that we can do for each other and not be so selfish.
Right.
We do live in a society, but one of the things that I do know, there's 5% of the society that are leaders and strive to be a part of that. And I know that I am. And if you think that way and you make sure that you are that leader, you'll always be on top.
Wow. And being a leader is really setting the example and paving the way for others. And I believe that you have been doing that, and you are committed now to continuing on that same path. So thank you so much, just for the future of not just New York City, but as an example to the other boroughs and the entire state of New York. I thank you for being that example.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Really.
And I think that in the same vein of what Heather just mentioned, where I love this part, but there is the part that I am concerned about, and I do want to know how that plays with you now, Ms. Simpson. It said that there's a lack of diversity within our district attorney's offices, our public defender's offices, and a lot of young people of color somehow do not see themselves in the role, either as prosecutors or public defenders? What would you say to that group that may aspire? And what would you say to these various entities that lack that diversity that speaks to the needs of a much more broader community? That's not, some people feel like that it's not reflective of who they are for our communities. What would you?
What I would say to the young people, the people the students who should be a part of that process, that you can only make changes from inside out. You can't, listen, I can't throw a baseball for a lick, but I will go in there and try to throw it. So you have to be in the game in order to play it or to win. So you can only make changes from inside out. In terms of what to say to the corporations and the DA's office themselves, or the public defender's office, I think just like what they say about law enforcement, you have to be a part of you have to have your organization reflect the people you are serving. And that's really what it should be. Reflect the people you are serving. And the same thing with the court system.
Right. And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just wanted to mention with the representation, as a lot of the NYPD, I understand, are not from the city or don't live in the city, but they commute. And I know that could potentially pose some conflict, and it probably does to some degree. So, what you just said really does speak volumes, to have that connection and the representation within the communities.
Yeah, and I just want to chime in, Heather, thank you for that, because for a lot of communities, the idea of community policing, when we think of it in the context as an advocate, and not just me, I'm just like a voice of those individuals, in our communities who, when I say the words police, community policing, that their idea of that is, the practice of hiring from within the communities, people that they're familiar with, faces that are, that they know, particularly like what we're doing, with you, Ms. Simpson, that I see, like, when I can think of your candidacy, I know that I'm talking about an individual who's from the community. I know I'm talking about someone who represents the community, and they didn't just start representing the community. This isn't like one day you said, oh, I'm just gonna, decide I'm gonna do this. You've been doing this for numerous of years, that you're just known in your community outside of your candidacy. It's just that Miss Simpson, that I'm going down to Miss Simpson house. That's Miss Simpson. That. Right. And when people, and I can already see the idea of individuals who may come into that'll be that connection that I think organically generates that internal trust that's lacking, not only in law enforcement, also lacks within our judicial system because of that. So I just wanted, and I know that I shouldn't be biased in this conversation, Heather, with Ms. Simpson, but I'm biased, and you're our favorite. I know you're supposed to be unbiased and just give me, but I think that this is what we've been waiting for. We've been waiting to be able to see.
Yes.
And what I'm more, listen, I just envision the day, as Heather just said, a generation of young people of color following in your footsteps, hopefully hearing this and pursuing a career in law and beginning to represent those very communities that they're in. And I'll go with Heather, and I'll say to you, I am so impressed right now. I am truly moved. These are things that I encourage in my students. This is the type of conversations we hope to have. The people some people see Barack Obama, and that's a bit far off, but when they can see it right in their own community, when they can see that vision of something better, how can I make a difference? I want to thank you for what you represented. Again,
really,
I'm biased, but
That that's okay. We're transparent on this. We're transparent on this.
Exactly.
In this forum.
Thank
That's
you.
it, right? I would love to have you both back on in a future episode, because I know that we have so much more to touch on, and I look forward to congratulating you, Ms. Roper-Simpson, on your success, because it is yours. It is coming back to you. And Mr. Coffee, always really great conversation. I appreciate it. I love the energy. And I just want to thank our audience for sticking with us. And I hope that you enjoyed the conversation today. I encourage you to like and share this video. And I welcome you back to our next episodes. This is Pros and Cons. Thank you.